joining today's session. Today is the 29th of September, and this is a session organized by the OT security professionals. I'm Kunal Shah, and I will be the moderator for today's session. Aditya, can you share your screen, please? So if we can go to the next slide, I'll kind of quickly do an introduction about Aditya and a little bit about today's session. And then we can kind of kick off, right? So we've got about, I'm going to spend a quick 5 minutes on welcoming everyone, talking a little bit about kind of our house rules. We'll spend about 40 to 45 minutes on kind of give the floor to Aditya, learn about honeypots, where they're used in the industry, what are the use cases, and what's the future looking like. We'll definitely allocate some time for Q&A and then and close it out very quickly for next sessions. Just some quick house rules before we get started. If you're driving, kindly stop in a safe place for the duration of the meeting. We don't want you to be distracted. This session will be recorded and available, so please always make sure take care of your safety first before attending this. We will manage the Q&A through MS Teams. So if you have any questions, please pop them in the Q&A chat box, and we will either we'll take it at the end with Aditya, or we'll address it offline, or one of the core members will definitely respond back to you. So just please be active on the Q&A group, and avoid putting in any questions in the chat message, because that just creates confusion, just makes a headache for monitoring and administration perspective. Right. So I think that's kind of generally about the house rules. We'll get some feedback at the end of the session from feedback form, and happy to kind of see how we can improve, what things went well, what things can be changed. So kind of we're adapting and evolving as we grow. So all feedback is good feedback. Now on to kind of today's speaker. So today's speaker is Aditya Srivastava. He's got a very strong background in OT security. He's kind of very knowledgeable and very passionate about OTSec and specifically about honeypots. So I'm gonna hand over the floor to him, and excited to learn more about and hear about you, Aditya. Over to you.
Thank you, Kunal, for the introduction. So a brief about me again, as Kunal mentioned about the smoke screen, I have working with honeypots when I was in my college. I did my bachelor's in computer science with specialization in UP's Dehradun. After that, I got an opportunity to work with smoke screen. And I'm currently focusing on learning more about the OT ICS environment by doing some large-scale consulting projects and following my passion towards safeguarding critical infrastructure environments. You can connect with me on LinkedIn. Here's my link, and through the speaker profile. So yeah, these are some QR codes. You can follow our community, OT Security Professionals, on LinkedIn page, WhatsApp, and Twitter. The topic of today, as we know, is reception technology or honeypots for ICS and OT infrastructure. And here is an agenda that we would be covering. First of all, we would be talking about what are honeypots and how they have evolved into reception technology, and where they would be beneficial in OT and ICS. Then what are the strategies and implementation that one can use in terms of for OT and ICS environments, and what are the general challenges and consideration that one needs to keep in mind, because these are very critical environments, and there could be risk associated with deploying them. And just wanted to make some awareness about what are the risks and benefits also about the technology, so that if we are going towards implementing these technologies carefully, we should know them and take them into consideration. But having said that, it's not all doom and gloom, but there are some tricky and smart moves one can use, which will still be able to trap the attackers which are trying to target the OT environment. Then we will talk about some of the real world use cases, which I have had my own experience of deploying these honeypots, as well as foreseeable future could be. And then we will conclude with the question and answers and some of the future direction of this area and of the industry's adoption of OT and ICS honeypots. So just to give a brief refresher, respecting the audience we have here, um, that honeypots, honey tokens, and honey nets are three of the concepts which were started way back in early 2000s. And as Lance Spitzner, who is the father of this technology, said, it's a security resource which has value when it's being compromised or attacked. So it's not exactly like your own asset, and if it's compromised, then there's a problem. But if this is a resource which is compromised, it's good in terms of security. Like, you are basically getting some insights into who is targeting your asset. So that's the basic concept behind what a honeypot is. There are certain characteristics involved regarding the honeypots. First of all, they should be discoverable, they should be interactive, they should be deceiving in a such a way that if an attacker is in your network and is trying to look for targeted assets, he should be lured towards the honeypot itself. And deceiving in the sense, like, it should be about how to make them look as well as the actual asset itself. The concept is that if it is an original replica of if it's a copy of the original asset, then it has certain characteristics which will allow it to gather intel about what exactly attacker is trying to do, because it can be monitored. You can log the activity, whatever keystrokes an attacker is trying to do, what kind of port it's trying to access, what kind of application it's trying to run. That's basically a concept behind the honeypot. Any questions so far, or we move with the topic, like, with the concept? Okay, so I assume that
Let's
everybody is
keep
on
the
board.
questions. Yeah, let's keep the questions for the end.
All right. So there are three types of honeypots. We have a low interaction, medium, and high. As per the saying, like, a low interaction honeypot would not give you much intel about what the attacker is trying to do, right? It would basically be on a surface level, like it would be just be an IP, or you can make a ping request. It's very low interaction. Then there's a medium interaction where you could open a full-fledged application, a service, or a port, and allow the logging of the traffic about the interaction on the network level or the application level. And then there's the high interaction version, which allows you the full gamut of the capability of honeypots technology, where one can basically interact with the services, ports, application, operating system, because it's exactly the replica version of an, or close to replica of an actual asset. Now, there are something called as honey tokens or lures, which is the similar technology used for deception technologies. These are basically fake data in form of um, information that traps an attacker or diverts them towards the honeypots from the original or critical assets. And these could be something like a URL, a IP address information put in an actual file of the decoy or the honeypot itself. And then there are certain things like you have your fake credentials, your fake processes. These could be some of the ways you can lure an attacker into thinking that, okay, this could be something that is an actual thing, but it's not. So that's basically the concepts of honey tokens or lures. Then there's honey systems. Systems in present days are called decoy. These are actual replica of the actual system with similar characteristics like the same ports, OS, and application. So honey systems or decoy could be categorized into high interaction honeypots itself. Then lastly, we have a honey nets concept. It's basically a network of honeypots or a separate network for the purpose of being compromised or being interacted with. So let's say if you have an actual VLAN of assets, but you don't want to put a decoy in the same VLAN where you have actual assets like production servers or your, let's say, a banking sector, in example, internet banking server. So you can create a fake network and a new VLAN altogether and put honeypots in that particular network and lure the attacker towards those. That is the concepts of honey nets. So this is what honeypots, honey tokens, honey nets, and these have been in the security industry for quite a while now. Um, um, and the things have now changed, have evolved and improved. So why honeypots needed to evolve? There are four major reasons. Honeypots had become very popular, and adversaries know that some places they could be found and were very much becoming more stealthier in terms of their approach towards attacking the organizations, especially in the IT environments. And as the maturity of IT environments also improve with implementation of advanced security solutions like proper IDS, EDRs, AVs in a more subdued manner, the attackers became also advanced in their approaches. And that's a challenge that Honeypots was not able to solve. They lacked realistic characteristics from an actual enterprise environment due to lack of customization option as per the asset. Like when I'm talking about customization option, like an asset in an IT environment will have its unique host name. It would have it would be placed in a certain VLAN where the asset needs to be as per the enterprise network architecture. It would be a certain critical application, which could be also a crown jewel. It could be internet banking application for the banking sector customers, right? So there were not easy to deploy and place these types of decoys or honeypots in an enterprise environments. So this was a challenge. Then honeypots could be set up like a standalone security system, which required individual resource to be monitor it and keep a track of it. But there was lack of a unified platform or something like a web dashboard where you can see what all honeypots or the decoys you have in your environment, how they're interacting, how you can configure them, etc. And that helped it to become scalable at an enterprise and maintain at an enterprise level. Lastly, one of the weakest point about honeypots were that they could be damaged, and redeploying them through custom measures by like uh, installing the application, opening the port, doing the troubleshooting was a lot of effort. But that's how the deception technology evolved. And I already mentioned all the 4 points that what were the challenges that honeypots had and how deception solved those. They were easy to scale and maintain, update, redeploy, and maintain, as well as have been successful in IT environments. Now we need to talk about when this technology has already been successful in IT environments, why we should consider them for OT and ICS environments. So here is an example analysis that I have tried to showcase. Since 2015, the attacks on the OT environments have significantly increased. And was the wake up call for organizations all around the globe to improve the maturity of the OT cybersecurity program for their environments. And a lot of organizations took the initiative to create roadmaps, strategies, conduct assessments, implement the remediation strategies that were already existing in IT environments like network segmentation, deploying an IDS solution, strengthening the firewall, monitoring the remote access through VPN, etc. And where we are now during 23-24, organizations have improved their maturity over the time. When they were around 0 to 3.5, now they are somewhere around 3 to 3.5. I guess this is a estimated numerical representation. The actual statistics could be different, but let's assume it's around 3.5 for majority of the organization. And we are seeing that adversaries are increasing the sophistication in OT environment. There are numerous OT-based malwares, like you have your Triton attack that was targeted towards safety PLCs in the Middle East. There has been ransomware specifically for ICS and OT environments. These are sophisticated attacks, and these are not so easy to detect because their adversary is always one step ahead of the defender, because they know what defender might be doing and they would plan their attack in similar fashion. In future, when these environments will get mature, there would be a humongous need for proactive security measures rather than reactive security measures. What do I mean by proactive means? You have your OTIDS, you have your endpoint solution, but these can only be used as a security measure when there is an alert and you can detect as you have a detection, and then you react upon that. But what when we have honeypots, it also acts as a threat intelligence agent where you have deployed honeypots or decoys in your environment in a strategical manner that allows you to proactively hunt threats also, or help in finding the assets or the misconfigurations in the environment as well. That's another use case. And definitely some of the zero-day attacks that could happen in OT environments could be detected with the use of honeypots if they're deployed properly. Any questions so far, like on any of the concept or any of the point, or we move ahead?
Let's move on ahead, Aditya.
Okay, thank you so much. So we discussed why honeypots or decoy could be deployed in OT and ISIS environments, but let's discuss some of the benefits. Here I have the ICS kill chain on the right hand side. It's a two-stage kill chain, and it of a malware called as Havix. Um, if we had decoys in place, we could have detected the presence of attacker early in the kill chain phase with a high fidelity alert. Because decoys are certain systems which are not supposed to be touched by normal users. And this will be alert that could give insight into a threat, right? So basically, we need to be very watchful of the alerts that are raised by decoys in this environment. That's what we have the benefit for. We can detect a presence very early in the kill chain because the kill chain is a long phase. It has lots of stages, but if we can get alert at any stage within the kill chain until the final execution of the attack, there is a high chance that we can take action to mitigate the damage or the risk itself. You can protect your crown jewels very efficiently because alert on the decoy in the same VLAN where your crown jewel is located. Um, you know that the attacker has reached in the network so deep where your critical PLC, your critical server is located, and it was going to target it. And these are way to know that your crown jewels are being compromised, and you can take effective action to spin up a new decoy, or also to gather more intel by keeping the decoy active within the crown jewel segment. You can get intelligence about 0 days because these decoys are capable to log activity about what kind of file or malware attacker is trying to deploy, what kind of script is it trying to run, what kind of uh, command it is trying to run. All of these can be logged, and you can get that intelligence and use that to improvise your security measure. For example, if you have 100 plants, right, and you get an intel from a decoy in one of the plants about a 0 day or something very different that you have not seen before, this could potentially help you to save other 99 plants by not letting that malware or 0 day malware spread across your OT plants networks across the globe, as an example. So let's talk about what is the strategy and what is the way to implement decoys, and let's do a deep dive, right? So as of now, we have covered what are honeypots, what are decoys, what are lures, what are honey nets. Why do we see there are benefits for it in the ISIS environments in the future? But there is an approach that needs to be followed properly so that you can yield the absolute benefits out of deploying these decoys. The thing that we need to keep in mind here is that everything about the successful of deploying deception or decoy networks is based on deception strategy. And I want to take an example of from a military background where you have the war happening at the India-Pakistan border, and military-based deception strategies have been used in war games a lot. So let's take an example that there are 5 bunkers at the side of Indian border and 5 bunkers at the side of Pakistan border, right? None of them know that there is a bunker which is a decoy or a honeypot or which is like a dummy where there is no soldiers in it, right? Now, um, a Pakistan soldier fires from the Pakistan border side and hit its a bunker on the which was a decoy on the Indian border side. Now, now this way, this strategy helps the Indian soldiers to know where did the attack came from the Pakistan border side. And certainly, the Indian soldiers can take a counter action by diverting their attack towards the Pakistan bunker or the direction which the attack came from. So there is 3 steps. You need to make the environment have the decoys in such a manner or the strategy in such a manner that it mimics the actual environment, where you have to have a plan of deploying the decoys and planting the lures that the attacker always thinks that it is a real system, which could be done by having the similar hostname pattern, by opening the same services or the ports that the actual crown jewel application is having. Let's say Apache Tomcat server uses specific HTTP server port, right? There could be some custom applications, and there are lots of them in OT environments. We can just open a particular port, and we can just make a full-fledged decoy of the actual systems. And then the thing comes about how to put them across the network. We need not to put a decoy in every VLAN or every segment of the entire enterprise or OT or ICS network, right? We just need to put the decoys in those places where we see our crown jewels are present and they can be targeted, right? If I have, let's say, if I take an IT environment example, we have several departments, right? We have several departments. We have IT department, we have security department, we have HR department, we have a finance department. But from an IT perspective, where would attacker find value? Attacker would find value if he tries to compromise a workstation of, let's say, a CEO, right? Or the HR team, where they have the records of the employees, right? Or try to compromise the production server, which is running the main application about the HRMS or the finance banking, etc. So we need to think about the strategy in such a manner that it is very effective. And we need to plant the lures up before the decoys, that the lures divert the attacker towards the decoys where the crown jewels are located. So it's the surface about deception strategy, but there's a lot of depth into deception strategy and effective measures that are present in terms of how to place decoys. And certainly, what helps is like if we think from an attacker's perspective, what he will target, what kind of techniques it might use. Like, for example, understanding the cyber kill chain. If he's inside the network, he will try to do lateral movement. To do lateral movement, he will need to first discover the assets. To discover the asset, he will need to do a scan. So we need to know about the offensive techniques or the attacker's behavior that he might do, and accordingly, strategically plant our decoys and lure them towards the crown jewels to get more high fidelity alerts and intelligence about the attacker's behavior in your environment. Okay, so we talked about the deception strategy in greater depth. Let's take a brief look at how we can use the deception strategy and implement decoys or honeypot technology, deception technology within an IT/OT environment effectively. So there are again 4 points, and on the right hand side, I have a representation of the Purdue model itself from level 0 to level 5. Let's take the top to down approach where we are talking about an attacker trying to reach the controller or the sensor or the PLC at the bottom layer of the Purdue model. But to do that, um, in the past, we have seen that it's not that easy um, because of the complexity of the OT networks and because of the strengthened connections of the through data diodes, firewalls, but still misconfigurations and weaknesses are always present. So let's take an example of recent attack trends where what is happening, the attacker are trying to target the production environment based companies by doing a ransomware attack on the IT environment, which is in turn making the boards or the security experts of these environments to take an action of halting the production so that there is no damage on the production machines itself or the ransomware not propagate towards the OT environment, right? So, but it 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 is something that could be detected at the layer 4, layer 5, and layer 3.5. How? First of all, there is a possibility that attacker has compromised the IT environment and they had no interest to target OT environments also. But when they are doing the discovery, they are moving across the network, they come across an asset which gives them an access point to the OT network via a remote access measure, misconfiguration of a dual host on an MES like an OPC, and that allows to access the OT network or maybe pivot from IT to OT environment. So if you plant your lures in IT environments or decoys within the places where you have an interaction between the IT and OT environment, you can get high fidelity alert about why somebody is trying to touch that decoy in the MES VLAN, right? Because a normal user might not touch that particular system. And that gives you an early indication, as I mentioned, the benefits, like you get an early indication about an attacker being present on the your network. And if you can predict, or if you can detect that, then you can stop or quarantine the main system by which the source of the attack happened. And you can investigate further, or you can take the decision of halting the production, as well as not having to hit the headline of there was a ransomware attack and that made the production being halted. But you can do it more stealthily by just keeping the information within the closed environment or corporate communications rather than getting the information being leaked over the headlines, which creates a damaged reputation as well as awareness amongst the attacks, amongst the competitor organizations also, which gives them an advantage. Now, let's say the attacker was not detected during the place where you have your OPC server or your management execution servers, um, uh, manufacturing execution server, sorry. Um, you can place the decoys in the IDMZ. Now, this serves the dual purpose. IDMZ, as we know, is a area where nowadays OT asset owners are trying to create connections through the to the internet for remote access requirements, for applications requirement to connect to the internet, even for cloud or IoT. And it's a entry point from the outside world or the internet where an attacker can try to infiltrate the OT network if it wants to. Like there are so many instances that still a lot of devices on the internet are exposed, or OT devices or the assets in the DMZ environment, um, which you can just look up on Shodan, and there you can just, an attacker can just compromise or the vulnerability present on a web server or application server historian, and there is a possibility that they can move to the OT network by establishing a foothold. Now, here what we can do is we can place decoys in terms of a replica of a data historian server. Like if you have a data historian server, you can have a copy of a data historian server, and let's say opening a particular remote access port on that, like, and not having the data historian server exactly having the remote access port open. But if you have the 3389 open on the or an SSH port open, the attacker might think like, okay, this date there might be DH1, DH2, and the DH2 has a VNC, SSH, or this port open, and you can basically just lure the attacker into compromising the decoy rather than the historian, and that will help you to raise a high fidelity alert, right? And certainly, you can also have a replica of an application server. For example, you can have a website. Let's say you have a website of some of your HRMS application just for OT engineers specifically. You can create a decoy website, and if an attacker is trying to make a subdomain enumeration over the through DNS enumeration tools, they might find the decoy DNS domain, and when they open that, you will get an alert that why is somebody trying to open this fake website, right? Then we have this approach where, let's say, an attacker is able to bypass the IT, the IDMZ, and is now present in the OT environment. What are the options we have here now, right? Now, usually, this is the production critical segments, and the assets are your major crown jewels, right? Because in OT, availability is more important than the breach of data or like just leakage of information, etc. Now, if an attacker has infiltrated, let's say there was a remote access to one of the engineering workstation, um, um, open, right? It was able to do that. And we also had a decoy engineering workstation, but it did not touch the decoy workstation, but touched the actual production workstation, and will now try to move much below by enumerating the controllers, right? And you can place a decoy for a PLC with, let's say, if you have a Siemens S7 200, 1500, Schneider Electric BMX P340 PLC, you can create a decoy version of that by opening the required OT protocol within itself, which is the for Siemens, it would be S7COM, port 102 for Schneider Modbus or other specific protocols. And you can basically try to see if an attacker is trying to make a scan within the control segment or is trying to fingerprint your devices, and your decoy PLC gets touched, which should not be touched by a normal user, is a way where you get a high fidelity alert at very low level of the Purdue model. And this in sense would be a wake up call to stop the production or create a counter measure by activating the backup strategy or incident response team, so that if let's say that particular attacker wanted to deploy a ransomware, could be prevented, and we could take the action by compromising this particular infected engineering workstation early in the stage. And last strategy, which is like because of certain considerations and the challenges of deploying decoys in an OT or ICS environment, which is like there could be IP conflicts with original assets, right? Let's say you have a original asset PLC, which is a 192.168.1.10, and there could be a human error or just a wrong information provided by the operator. And while deploying, when the decoys do go live, uh, the decoy PLC 192.168.1.10 had the same IP as the original asset. Now, this is a catastrophic event where this would hamper the functioning of the actual PLC itself, and it's a risk that could be. And if not taken, the deployment of these decoys in this environment carefully could damage the machinery, or can be catastrophic in terms of halting the production, or the HMI application, or anything being unavailable. um, then another example of this being of an IP conflict in a DCS environment is with the license server. We all know that the DCS environments rely on a license server, and all the assets are continuously being pinged by a license server. Let's say an attacker compromises, like your decoy license server, or any of the decoy has the same IP as the license server. The license server might not work properly, and that could be a problem. Now, during the deployment itself or implementation, you need to consider initial period of fine tuning, because during the deployment and post deployment, false positive will be raised, as these decoys are now part of your network. And to an actual attacker, they are also an asset, right? And basically, certain applications within the environments, like a vulnerability management server, might do schedule scans. Some OTIDS have this active scans capability. They can do active scan and touch the decoy. An operator might try to interact with the actual asset, but might have mistyped the IP address, and or being unaware. So there would be fair share of false positives also, but there is an initial period of fine tuning, which once done, and the journey of the pain point has been taken, would yield in having the decoys active, and you would be very much get the benefits of it. The last consideration is to be aware that the deception strategy needs to be implemented properly, because without that you cannot yield effective results, as uh, not being customized properly, like you do not have the right port, or the right application, or the host name looks not matching to the organization format, then the attacker would know that this could be a honeypot. Because nowadays attackers are also aware that deception technologies are being deployed in environments as well, and they know how to bypass decoys, or are being more smarter about this. The upper hand we have in OT or ICS environments is that it's still not adopted widespread because of the lack of maturity level we are seeing. Now, the question might be arising, okay, these are some big risks and these are some big challenges. And during the FAT or the SAT procedure, if these are miss out, and there, by God forbid, there is a IP conflict post deployment and something happens, it could be huge problem. Let's say it does not happen, but there's not the entire end of the world. There's an approach which I will talk about now, is called as the fake plant. We discussed the concept of honey nets in the initial slides. It's a similar concept in ICS environments, where we can create a honey plant network or fake plant network by introducing a new VLAN. It could be within the control zone, it could be within the DMZ zone, enterprise zone, wherever. And one of the best strategies, like if you have a fake plant, you can create a lure in the enterprise segment or the DMZ segment, so that the attacker, if is in IT or in the DMZ segment, rather than pivoting towards the actual OT, gets pivoted towards the fake plant or the fake OT network, which has the decoys, and you can replicate the entire model of the actual OT environment into a full-fledged fake OT environment with the similar looking assets, and deceiving the attacker in such a manner that if it tries to interact with the fake OTD decoys, you are still not in a position where your actual assets are being compromised or damaged. You are getting a high fidelity alert about or intelligence about an infected machine being targeting this fake network, which nobody knows and is deployed. And you can take action to isolate that machine or quarantine that infected machine before reaching it to the control layer or the actual OT assets itself. So this is the approach. Then we would talk about some of the use cases. Um, we talked about Havix, right? I think we are running short on time, so I will cover both of the two use cases rather very quickly. So I have two use cases for you. One is the Havix malware, which was a cyber espionage malware targeted towards the US and the EU energy sector by a Russian hacker group called Energy Bear. And they broke into the ICS SCADA systems and tried to relay sensitive data back to the hackers. The thing that they did was, while targeting this environment, was to initiate the foothold. They did two strategies. First of all, they uh, compromised the web pages of ICS vendors, and there's a very famous attack called as the waterhole attack, which where they made the OT engineers click bait the fake vendor website, and that created a C2 connection with the hacker server. That was one approach. And the second was through targeted spear phishing or social engineering based phishing campaigns run by connecting back to the C2 server by the spear phishing approach. Once the connection was made, the malware wanted to uh, just gather information within the OT environment. The specific thing that this particular malware wanted to do was scan for OPC servers and applications on port 44818 and also look for Modbus based devices for port 502. This way, it was able to gather the data logs or the data present in the OPC server. And as we know, the OPC server is a specific server which collects all the logs or the sensor readings from the down the or the from the devices on the lower layers of the Purdue model, which is the PLCs, the sensors, and that information, if collected by the attacker, could be beneficial to understand how the particular plant was, how the physical processes were, and can craft their malware in a way that would be more cyber physical in nature, in terms of manipulating the physical parameters at the physics or compromising with the physics of the physical processes and making it look like a mechanical failure, like something that happened with Stuxnet, for example. But it was more like a cyber espionage campaign. But what if we had deception in this environment? If I had a OPC server honeypot where the actual OPC servers were, and I had exposed port 44818 onto it, and I would have gotten alert about that particular scan being made, I would have been able to find the infected hosts and take action appropriately, and might have prevented the loss of my data about the sensor reading and stopped the bad guys to learn more about my plant behavior. Um, this was one of the use case. Then the second one, I think, ending our almost towards the end of our talk on the use case of ransomware, which is very much talk of the town. And I wanted to focus right now on ICS specific ransomwares. So I don't know how many of you know that a plant in Honda was hit by a ransomware known as Snake. And it was ICS specific ransomware which had the characteristics of targeting the processes used by ICS vendor applications. As per I know, there was the the code of the ransomware has a kill switch to kill all the processes of the Prophecy, which is a historian-based client, as well as Rockwell Automation. and as well as evading antiviruses by killing AV processes. It was a multi-stage ransomware attack. It's a great case study where the ransomware tried to follow the entire cyber kill chain by compromising the OT network, then gathering the credentials through mimikatz, as well as gathering more information about the networks and killing them. They also tried to encrypt config files, application files, and halted the production of Honda. So the question that arises, could deception have helped to identify it, and how? This is a question for the audience. By the information shared so far, can anybody give an idea about how could we have tried to do this? Anybody in the audience?
You can raise your hands if you have any query. We will unmute you.
I think maybe Aditya, you can only help us solve it.
Okay, so
Oh, we do have somebody. Wait, it's Ashit. Puneet, can you just unmute him?
You are unmuted, Ashit.
The only way I could possibly think is that because most of the ransomware attacks come from the IT side of the fence. So if you have deployed some kind of decoy or honeypot on the IT side with a similar configuration, possibly the ransomware creators could have been, using this kind of a deception technology, they could have been brought in, and the impact to OT could have been avoided. Because if you see, most of the attacks have happened, including Colonial Pipeline, that have come from the IT side, not necessarily from the OT side directly.
exactly. That's one approach. Anybody else in the audience? Thank you, Ashish. I think we have another person.
You unmute me?
Yes, we can hear you, Dan.
Excellent presentation. I just want to ask two questions. Why are we confused among the terms ransomware and file encryption? These are two different things. Ransomware refers to money and encryption refers to damaging file. These are two different things. My second question is that I don't recall any event when the files in the OT net that someone deployed any kind of deception within the OT network. All the deception, all the decoys, everything is related to IT. So we need to clearly think about these things, because as we know, worldwide, since the Stuxnet, we have seen probably less than 50 OT directed attacks, and none of them probably was ransomware or was file encryption. What do you think about it?
I think, Dan, file encryption and ransomware are actually two different topics, but file encryption is major part of the ransomware, because when a ransomware is, let's understand that file encryption is the end goal of the ransomware. A ransomware is a multi-stage malware which has lot of abilities. From, if we take about the consideration of cyber kill chain, it is able to have lot of tools in its armory. A ransomware, if you look at the entire case study about how a ransomware operates, It is able to also scan the environment. It is also able to steal the credential. It is also able to kill the processor, as I was telling here. So why it tried to kill the processes in an OT environment, like the prophecy, client.exe, etc. That stopped the particular prophecy application itself, right? And that could have been detected at that level because there are something called as fake processes. These are fake processes decoy, and if somebody interacts with a fake process itself, you can get an information about a ransomware being targeted, or not say ransomware, but somebody trying to or any advanced stage malware or any APT malware. Now, when I compare about file encryption, the interaction with files is how ransomware tries to encrypt them, right? So if we have fake files deployed in the OT environment, not also in the IT environment, and somebody tries to interact with those fake config files or application files, which are not known to a normal user, but are hidden in such a manner that only attacker are able to find those through by either going deep dive into doing a directory search of the C drive, D drive, E drive, or the application folders exactly, and try to encrypt that. Because when they're trying to encrypt the entire system, and one of these file decoys is also touched, you will get an alert that if one system is being touched, then that means that this could be a ransomware attempt, right? And then you can look at your intelligence or the logs on the platform itself, and where you can try to prevent the propagation of that particular ransomware being propagated across the network. Just to be clear, that ransomware is also a malware because it also behaves in lot of, it has lot of tools in its armory which can do. The ultimate goal of a ransomware is specifically to encrypt data and to fetch out ransom from the organization so that they can earn money. That's the end goal. But they are also malwares, first of all. And anything that a malware does, there are a lot of things that a ransomware also characteristics. Coming to your another question, that's the point of the approach of having the fake plant, because deception, while I was working with the smokescreen, now Zscaler, we did not saw widespread adoption of OT deception within their plant environments. But some of our customers did took the approach of the fake plant, and nobody was very much confident to deploy a decoy, even through a validated fat set approach in the control layer or at the level 0, level 1, and nobody wanted to take the risk. But having said that, um, as the maturity of the OT environments will improve, and we would have proper security teams, we would have established security programs, we would have established applications and more maturity, and we would have the maturity of OT environments, cybersecurity as close to IT environments. um, Even if we put one decoy or few decoys very carefully with all awareness within the OT environment, and let's say someday it does get triggered or by any type of malware or ransomware, from an organization's goal perspective, a one plant, one decoy being targeted by a zero-day ransomware or malware can give them an alert to activate their counter cyber defenses across other plants across the globe. So that's what the major use case it could have if we do take OT deception um, across the cyber program implementation in future.
But I have a question here, Aditya, and that I have asked. This is Ashit again. I put those questions in the chat also, rather than the Q&A. Many of the federal legislations, at least in the US, near term will not allow. Nuclear Regulatory Commission, NERC, etc., would prohibit use of any such thing, unless you do it in a very segregated, secluded, simulation environment. That's a different thing. But the plant level, no matter what maturity you get, even at OT level, at the highest level, nobody's going to take these chances. and especially when I am in a hazardous environment where SIS, safety interlocks, etc. are there, it would never go through that kind of approval process. Absolutely no.
I guess like that's a stereotype we have, but uh, somebody in future, if they see the value in the technology, they feel that they want to take the risks, they want to take the chances, they can. But I respect your opinion, and they could be government plants where or the critical infrastructure facilities nobody wants to take the risk. But if I talk about enterprise environments, some business owners are maybe ready, they can, but the technology is there, strategies are there. It's all about adoption and utilizing it more effectively. But yeah.
No, as a technology, I understand, yes, but going through the regulation clearances is not going to be possible, whether it is DoD, NUCSIP, etc. I'm telling you because I've been in the US for 23 years, and I have seen all this. IT side, yes, that's not a problem because it's a very mature and very well understood and taken. Obviously, you need to get the hurdle passed through Federal Wiretap Trap Act, which basically prohibits from privacy perspective. But if you go through that legal juggernaut, it's possible on IT. But OT side, I'm telling you, in the light of some of the very strictly enforced regulations, it may not. At least in the near future, I can say. I don't know unless federal government is going to change those laws.
Yeah, like I can't comment on the what government's plans are, but like there are benefits, use cases, possibly a very good technology already available, which could be able to detect very advanced attackers and malware. And trust me, because if an attacker knows there's deception in place, uh, they would become more stealthier in their approach. And that is a win in my terms from a cyber defender perspective. And the this is because the deception technology is so advanced these days, it has become very non-invasive because the entire platform or the platform itself is handling the computing resources, the decoys. Nothing is to be no asset is being used by the business owner, or which was the case with the honeypots. And the lures or the honey tokens, they are not at all going to do anything to the system, and they are just like a clickbait or like a honeycrumbs or like a cheese. If I talk about mouse, mouse want to eat cheese, like, and they are still some of the tips and tricks or the strategies that are can be very effective. If not, we want to implement deception at a very full scale, but from an
Yes.
IT/OT pivot point of view, fake plant point of view, as well as one decoy in one production LAN with a very or exactly three IP addresses with a new VLAN of no OT asset within that environment, etc. Lastly, I wanted to conclude with some of the resources that you can check out. So basically, some open source honeypots are available already. There is canary tokens, which are basically if I just showcase this link, you can configure. 1 second. Can you see my screen?
We're still seeing the additional resources, Aditya.
How about now?
No, still the same. Maybe in the interest of time, we just leave this Aditya to like something that people can explore on their own, and then come back to you if there's kind of any specific questions.
Yeah, Just to conclude, there is canary tokens. There is a full-fledged open source honeypots project run by the honeynet.org. This was the first organization, open source organization. They started back in early 2000, and I also have contributed while in my college days through GSOC projects, as well as working closely with some of the developers, and while I was working with Smokescreen. Then there's this GitHub link has list of all the honeypots already available, which are all open source for not just ICS, but IT, application, AWS, cloud, etc. And some of the OT, IoT specific are the Conpot, the RIoT pot for IoT, and then there are certain leading disruption technology platform vendors. There's the Zscaler, Fortinet, and Sentinel-1. And I worked with Smokescreen, which is now Zscaler. So yeah. So the floor is open for Q&A. And anybody has any question or wants me to talk about any of the concept, please let me know.
Yeah, just raise your hand, please. If you have questions or comments, then we can handle it. Aditya can take that on. Yeah, we have one. Amit, you're unmuted.
Thanks, Aditya. It was wonderful discussion. Anyway, nice topic. Lot of debate can happen. Healthy technical debate. Now I already asked, but I think Canary you mentioned. Canary is the open source honeypot, right? So what is there? Can you compare Conpot, Gaspot, Gridpot, Canary, all of them? Just very quickly.
Candidate tokens is an like I don't know why my screen share is not working, but it's a website where you can deploy the honey tokens on a personal level also. Like you have webbug, you have like you can create a fake URL, you can create fake files, you can create AWS keys DNS token, and it could also be in use of for preventing your own personal information. Like you can have that fake file on your own system, like that, or a critical server. This is just an open source option, and Conpot is a full-fledged OT honeypot where it has the capability to emulate the protocols that are supported in an OT environment. If you see on my right-hand side, um, there are a list of the protocols from the GitHub page of Conpot, like the Modbus, Backnet,
Aditya, can you just go full screen? Maybe it'll be a little more clear.
Go ahead. Hello.
Can you see my screen?
Yeah, we can see your screen. It's just not showing full screen, like just so that you can highlight some of the things that you're talking about. That's all. But if not, then go ahead.
Yeah. So on the Conpot side, like we have this full-fledged emulator of the OT protocols itself, and it's a Docker-based application. So you can just deploy the Docker on your own. Let's say if you want to deploy Conpot in an OT environment without a deception platform, just spin up a virtual machine. Within that, you can deploy Docker and run it with Conpot itself, and it would be able to emulate the behavior of a PLC like S7200. And the Conpot is very customizable. It has a lot of configuration options where you can just change the particular fingerprinting of the asset. Like there are certain XML files within Conpot which you can just change the name of the PLC, the plant name, etc. And if you just go on to Shodan and you would just search for type:/PLC, you would find a lot of ICS honeypots exposed. And since Conpot is very popular now, it is very easy to detect it also. That's why, like, as you mentioned, as the reception platforms are more matured, and they have the ability to customize honeypots in a more granular fashion. And Conpot is limited in terms of its functionality. That's why, but still, it exists. Then Gasport, as you mentioned, I think is for a gas Guardian AST or some other vendor-based machine, and particular ports that particular machine uses is the way Gasport works. And I think my screen share is working. So I think, are you able to see the Canary Tokens website?
Nope.
Okay, no
Maybe it's
problem.
stuck. I don't know what's happening.
Yeah. So that's what Conport is, and like Gasport is different, and there is like a lot of scope in the research direction for honeypots or OT environments. One of the use cases that I am looking towards is like digital twins being used similar fashion for from an honeypot's perspective. Like if we have digital twins of machinery, we can have a digital machinery decoy, right? And that if an attacker is trying to interact with the digital twin machinery, it is also giving you more clarity about the attacker's behavior. And the scalability about like how we can have digital twins in terms of having the more lower level, like if you have a gas turbine, like a particular attack on a gas turbine in future could be a possibility. And if we have a honeypot gas turbine or a decoy of a gas turbine, an attacker by chance tries to interact with that and tries to compromise it from a cyber physical aspect, then we get an high fidelity insights into detecting a very ICS specific cyber attack, just like what happened with the case of Triton, where in case of Triton, the attacker targeted the safety PLCs, and that compromised the halt of the production. So the future direction could be that we could mimic the machinery itself. Currently, the scope revolves around we can mimic the PLC itself, the HMIs, EWS, the servers, but in future with advent of digital twin, we could have the machinery itself also, and the approach of fake plant could become more mature.
Okay. Okay. Thanks, Jeff. I think I have a couple of questions, but in the interest of time, I would like to connect you offline. But I just put it on the chat box. Some of them, like legal issues, or I want to understand a little bit more on the teapot and grey pot, or something like what attackers are doing to bypass honeypots, and then CISO's priority list. In that list, where does the honeypot? But I think that was being discussed in Daniel's question, or something like that. I can connect offline. I mean, in the interest of time, this we are being late. Yep. Thanks, dear.
Sure,
Wonderful.
no problem. Thank you.
Thanks. Thanks, Aditya. Any other last questions before we wrap up? Okay, thank you. I mean, I think this has been a really informative session. Thank you, Aditya, for sharing. I mean, honeypots is relatively nascent, definitely in the OT ICS area, but especially as OT security professionals, it's important for us to know kind of upcoming technology and new ways to protect. And thank you all for attending.
Thank you, everyone. Have a great day. Happy weekend.
Bye.